Welcome back to another episode of That's Business. Today's guest, Emily Wrobel, is the Economic Development Specialist for the City of Royal Oak here in Michigan. She runs a business retention and expansion program offering crucial support and technical guidance to current and prospective businesses, thanks to her unique experiences across various sectors. Prior to her current role, Emily worked on the International Business Development Team at the Consulate General of Canada here in Detroit, and has a background in the plumbing industry, real estate investment, and management practices. She graduated from Michigan State University with a degree in French. Emily, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm really excited to dive into everything. Growing up, did you want to be an economic development specialist, or what did you want to be when you grew up?
No, so I don't know of any kids who say, when I grow up, I want to be an economic development specialist. I honestly didn't even know what that was until just a handful of years ago, really. So when I was little, I wanted to be, like a teacher, like everybody sees and and that's kind of part of your world. But other parts that were part of my world growing up were my grandparents owned a plumbing business. That kind of gave me my first perspective of working with small and medium-sized business owners. So, as a kid, you don't really understand everything, but you do understand that, on weekends or on vacations, the laptop is coming with you. There's probably going to have to be some phone calls. Your plans might have to be changed around a little bit. But it also gave me, a unique perspective in seeing all it really takes and how, to be a small business owner and how it affects everyone around you.
That is such a unique perspective, too, because I also come from a lineage of small business owners on both sides of my family. And you are right about the phone calls and the laptop. And even now, that's the first thing that comes with me on vacation is wallet and laptop. So I feel that to my core. So we go to Michigan State. I mean, how did you decide on a degree in French? Because I feel like that's very difficult and not an easy degree path we typically see.
It's kind of a weird, convoluted way. I actually did not start out at MSU at all. When I first applied when I was in high school and trying to figure out where I wanted to go, I actually got rejected from MSU. And so my first year of university, I went away to Grand Valley. And I will be honest, it was not for me. I absolutely hated it. This was back right when Grand Rapids was kind of starting to become a thing. But I was also, younger. You couldn't really drink or do anything like that. And if you didn't have a car, you were kind of stuck on the Allendale campus or to the whims of the bus system. So I realized, it wasn't really for me. So I tried applying to some other colleges too to transfer, and, it just didn't really work out. So my second year, I actually moved back home, lived with my parents, and went to Macomb Community College. So I was there full time. It was, a very different transition. I was working pretty much full time at a Tim Hortons, of course.
Of course.
And I was just glad to be able to continue my education with something a little bit more reasonable-ish. I put air quotes around that because college is still stupid expensive.
Yes.
But I really appreciate that time to be able to save up the money, get a little bit of real world experience with a job and trying to balance a job and going to school. So Macomb for me was always bridge the gap. Let's get to where I want to be. So at the end of Macomb, I reapplied to MSU again. So this was, I think, the second or the third time that I applied there. And I finally got in. So I was super duper happy, to be there. And I thought that I wanted to go into dietetics of all things, and nutritional science. So MSU has a great school for that. One of the best in the state. And so I went there. I kind of, before classes started, walked around campus with my mom and my grandma. And we went to that building and, just to see what it was like, where all my classes going to be. And I felt nothing. I was like, this is not what I was expecting. It was kind of like a, oh shit kind of moment. I finally got here after all these years of trying. Thought I knew what I wanted to do, but nope, just kidding. So that's kind of where the French comes in. I have been learning French kind of on and off with lessons since I was a child. Always loved it. My parents even tell me of stories when I was 4 or 5 years old in these classes, and I would dress up in a little Madeline costume because that's when the TV show was on.
I loved Madeline. I had all the books. So yes, I know exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. Still a big fan of her.
Yes.
So I was like, well, I don't really know what to do. I don't know what else feels like me. But French was always one thing that I excelled at really well. I was I did it all throughout high school. I did AP French. I was even a French exchange student for a couple of weeks when I was in high school too. And I was one of the only people on that whole group, actually talking with the other French students in French. And it wasn't that good. I only had a couple of years of conversational French at that point. But I was like, okay, if I'm doing this and those other kids know less French than me, maybe I do kind of know a little bit. So it just kind of felt right. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be spending a lot of money to MSU for them to give me a piece of paper that tells me, yeah, you know how to do something. And I figured if I'm going to be doing that and spending all this time, it might as well be something that I like and I'm good at. So I didn't really have a path in mind at all. I thought maybe I want to be a French teacher, maybe not, because teachers aren't really treated super well and don't have a lot of support. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to figure it out. I'm just going to go with what I know I'm good with and what feels right. So that's kind of how I got started, doing French. Absolutely loved it. I would take some of the upper level courses where it was linguistics or phonetics, the crazy stuff that you're no one ever, do you really need this? And it challenged me in a way that I had never had before. I had a really great French teacher in high school. Shout out to Madame Blaine. And, it just kind of opened my eyes to a whole different way. Some classes I would leave, I would love it, just be absolutely absorbing everything. And then it would just be so much that I would have a headache afterwards. But it was so good. Thoughts still spinning around and still thinking about it. So that's how I knew it was kind of the right thing. And the other stuff will fall into place. You'll know what's right when it's right. So when I was at MSU, so I was only there for, my last 2 years of college. And that was great living in East Lansing. It was one of the first times I had ever been in a city that was walkable. Because Allendale is pretty much you need a car. And
yes,
once you're on campus, you're on campus. So I thought that was just the coolest thing where I could take the bus from my apartment and go all the way to campus where I wanted to. I could go wherever I wanted to. I could walk and there was stuff to do. It was just kind of however far you wanted to take it. So while I was at MSU, I also, I'm also Canadian, very proud to be Canadian as well. And MSU has randomly one of the only Canadian studies centers in the entire US. There's about 3 of them.
I didn't know that.
I know, it's not ever something you think about. But considering, the high amounts of trade that historically have happened between our two countries and my personal links and the French, it's, kind of a little bit of everything. So I was like, okay, I can do this. So I still remember this. I very excitedly, before school even started, went to the International Student Center where all of the different, international programs were, ran up the stairs to the 3rd floor because I was so excited to go there. And I mean, it was a small little operation. Don't get me wrong, but I was just so excited. So I go up there and I asked, are there any job opportunities or research or, any internships, and just saying how excited I was. And they had already filled 2 of the positions, but they ended up, because I was so excited about it, they ended up creating a position for me where I was kind of a events coordinator, sort of. So one of my counterparts, she did all the research. Other one did graphic design and everything like that. And so I was kind of put all the stuff together. And that was really fun to be able to do that and to kind of grow and explore that connection too. And then I didn't have a major. I only had one major. I didn't have a double major or a minor. So I had to, my college, the College of Arts and Letters at MSU requires that you have to have a concentration. So basically kind of a group of classes that are all surrounded by a theme. And that's a graduation requirement. So I chose 2. I chose business because, I kind of knew at that point, I was I don't think I really want to be a teacher. That's always the first thing that people say is, oh, French, you want to be a French teacher? Not really. That's not for me. So I did that and kind of created my own pseudo Canadian studies kind of concentration. The actual official program for it was on moratorium and they didn't want to allow it. But, my counselor and I just kind of worked it together. to kind of just meet the graduation requirement. So I was able to take classes from like the geography section. I was able to do like a independent study with one of my French professors. So I like taught myself about like the history of French in Canada. So kind of like make a little ramshackle sleigh to kind of put it all together for what I needed to do. So that's a whole big story behind why I have French, as my degree.
How did you end up, I mean, of course, being Canadian as well, how did you kind of end up, I mean, what was your international business development team at the Consulate General of Canada in Detroit? Wow, is that a mouthful? But how did we end up there? Because that sounds like a very impressive, very high detailed job. So did you end up in there first out of school, or how did you kind of get into that field?
I was very lucky to get there, and that was like a pipe dream that I didn't even know existed. I had a couple of jobs in between when I graduated university and when I started at the consulate. So in between then, I was working for my family's plumbing company. I called myself the office coordinator, but colloquially, I called myself the office gopher. So you go for this, you go for that, you go for this, and all that.
Oh my God, I love that.
So I was doing a little bit of everything. I was, the one office person, like consistently in the office, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So if the master plumber needed anything or had a question office related, he would typically ask me first. I was doing everything from like accounts payable, accounts receivable. I went through and like reorganized their entire like physical archives of documents from the past like 7 to 12 years. While I was there, I also went through and like created a kind of a system to make sure that we were quoting jobs accurately. So a lot of the stuff that it was a residential plumbing companies primarily. They did a little bit of commercial, a little bit of medical offices, but mostly like residential was like the bread and butter. We worked with a certain number of builders and they have, similar plans. So we would be able to go through and say, okay, if this is how we're, building it, this is like the most logical way to go through and do all of this. How much are we actually spending? Is this part cheaper from over here versus over here? So I started doing like product tracking, project quotes as well. So writing proposals. I would even go submit permits at the different township offices and cities, and even down to like running material. Like, oh no, the guys are out on this job and the toilet that they got delivered broke, sort of thing. Or like, oh, they didn't realize that, they had to have this part. So it was, like I said, a little bit of everything. And then after that, I worked at a not-for-profit charter school that focused on supporting kids through the arts. So they follow it's Arts Academy in the Woods. They follow the Interlochen method. So like based on the arts camp up in Interlochen in Michigan in the UP. Everything was focused around art. Even like math, science classes. They had like, other types of art classes like different dances or writing, 2D, 3D art, tons of music program. And so I was their data parapro there and in charge of the like power schools. So I was like the person like running all the numbers, making sure, that everyone was like taking attendance, because it's not just taking attendance. Like there's a lot of other reporting that goes into it. Doing reporting to the state for that kind of thing. I was in charge of the lunch program, doing a little bit of like scheduling as well. And I was very thankful for that job. I'll be frank, it was to pay the bills.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do in order to make ends meet. But it was right after that I got started at the consulate. The family knew somebody, my family's in the auto industry, and, everybody knows everybody there.
They do.
So
yes.
I was very fortunate to kind of have an in on that. So the first time I applied there, it was for a temporary position, and I ended up not getting it. They knew that a couple of retirements were coming later on that year and had kind of thought of me for that instead. I've been told no a lot of times, but if I really want something, I'm going to keep going for it.
I want to talk about that for a second a little further, because, I mean, quite literally, if you didn't keep applying to MSU, if you didn't keep going on the career path, I mean, you and I definitely wouldn't have met based on how you got to where you are today. But
yeah,
what has that been like? I mean, you're obviously a tenacious person. And like you said, if I want something, I'm going to go after it, which is a lot harder than just being like, oh, woe is me. This sucks. Life sucks. That's so much easier to go down that path. So what's kind of your mentality behind, well, if I want something, I'm going to go after it? Because it's hard for a lot of people, I think.
I definitely went through everything that you said. Like, woe is me. Like, why don't they want me? I'm so, I should be able to do this. And then it kind of, would go back on like negative self-talk. Well, maybe they see something that I don't. Maybe I can't actually. This isn't the right thing. It's just that I'm just thinking too much. Blah, blah, blah. It's too hard. So I definitely went through all of that like every single time. And it was really hard. I'm not going to lie. Mostly mentally to bring yourself back to it. But everything, that I feel very strongly about, there were things, so like going to MSU, choosing French, doing the whole Canada thing. They were all things that I felt very deeply like with inside of me that I knew that there was like no other choice. Like I could think of other things, but they just didn't, quite had that same like resonance. It didn't like get me excited, even just that little spark inside. So I just kind of knew, I'm like, okay, just, I can have my little sad pity party. Definitely give time for that, for grieving and letting yourself process those emotions. That is like number one, most important. Like give yourself a little bit of space and grace to feel all the things that you're feeling, have all your thoughts. But for me, it was really just like digging deep down, remembering why I wanted to do it in the first place and seeing how, like giving myself like the different options. Like, well, if you don't do this, this is what, it could potentially look like, further down the line, and realizing that's not really what I want. So that's kind of how I dealt with being rejected and saying, no, no, no. If it's meant to be, it will be.
Well, and giving yourself time too, whether it's, a month, a few weeks, a few years, because I feel like a lot of people, and I'm the same way. I mean, I'm so guilty of that, of, starting this business. I remember like year 2 or year 3, or even this podcast, I was like, no one's going to listen to it. Why are we going to do this? This is so silly. And now it's viewed in like 53 countries or something crazy last time I looked. But we're so hard on ourselves, where so many other people, I feel like, have a different connotation, or just like, oh my God, Emily's so confident. Emily has it all together. And I would have never guessed you had these different situations throughout. I always will remember when we first met. I don't even know if you remember this, but you were one of the first people, or few people I've met, that you like made such an impact, because you're just so warm. You're just like a baddie when you come into rooms, and you just kind of like command the room, and you don't even mean to, but from your confidence, from your like, tell me about you. How'd you get in here? And like, you should have been a reporter in another life, I think. But you are just one of those people that always have had a lasting impression on me, just because when I met you a few years ago, you're just like so warm, so like welcoming. And I'm like, well, you tell me to do whatever. Like I'm leading the parade for Emily, like whatever, because you just are that type of person. So I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I would have never guessed that. So I love that. Now, explain to us in simple terms, what does economic development encompass? I mean, what does that mean? What does that look like working for the Canadian Consulate in Detroit? I mean, what kind of tasks does that do? Because I feel like a lot of people don't really understand both terms and how that kind of impacts them and things like that.
Sure. And that's something that I didn't even know when I first started.
I didn't either.
I'm like, okay, I guess we'll figure it out as we go.
Yeah.
So the basic terms of like what economic development is, it's having programs, policies, procedures to increase the economic prosperity of a certain area. So it's a very broad definition. And a lot of economic developers would tell you, well, we do a lot of everything and a lot of nothing.
I love the honesty.
So a lot of time is spent in meetings and making connections. I would say making the connections is one of the top functions of what economic developers do. So if you go back to the definition of programs, policies, procedures that increase the economic wealth of a certain area, that can be done through a ton of different ways. Like there are so many different things that you can do, and what you do and what you want to do drastically changes on different, what community, what region, what area you're talking about. So like there's economic development, from, the tiniest, like little village up to like a city, mid-sized city like Royal Oak with about 60,000 people. It's people, like up in Detroit, in Pontiac, in Lansing, across the whole state, like with MEDC, Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So those different programs and policies can look like workforce support. Like I know some people are talking about like workforce housing, affordable housing. Can be anything from another hot topic right now is childcare, because, you need people to work. That's kind of what like the whole thing is how to get people working in capacities that match what their skills are and what they want to do. So it could be that. It can be even stuff like planning. Like I didn't even really know before I started working at the city, I didn't really know what planning and the planning department does. I just knew they were like next to the building department. But having a plan, like the master plan for like how you want to grow a city and having that be intentional, that's part of economic development too. And it can be other things like placemaking. So making like public spaces that are welcoming and an area outside of your home and outside of your work to gather and connect with other folks. So you can see that in like in downtown Royal Oak, for example. We could see that with like alleyway improvements, so like adding, like some string lights, cleaning up an alleyway, adding like a cute mural, or like Centennial Commons Park in downtown Royal Oak.
Oh, which I love. So pretty.
Yes, I do too. At work, one of our shared office has a perfect view of that. So it's so cool to see it being used very dynamically throughout the entire year, like summer, spring, fall, winter. There's always something going on. There's always people, dogs, kids walking through it. So, you just kind of find what works for you and what the community needs. So in international business development, so that's like that sounds like very intimidating and impressive, but business development is another aspect of economic development. It's sort of like sales, but you're not necessarily like selling a product to a customer in like a traditional way. It's more about like understanding the industry of, whatever sector you're in. So it can be anything in the private industry. It can be even like public sector sort of work to an extent. But that also is about making connections between like different companies, different organizations in order for them to meet their goals and grow how they want to. So at the consulate, I provided admin support, admin plus. I did like 3 different jobs there, providing admin support to a team of, I think there were about 7 of us, including like locally engaged staff. So like folks, local from the area, and diplomats who came in from Canada on a rotating basis. So our locally engaged staff, they were all experts in certain sectors or certain like different industries that are important to like the region that the office covers, which is Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, and Michigan. And actually this market, these like 4 states are the number 1 first time exporting region for Canadian small, medium-sized businesses.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that.
So we had a person covering like the automotive and mobility industry. We had somebody covering like tech and communications, clean tech, green tech. We had someone covering agriculture, food, beverage, wine, spirits. We had 2 folks covering foreign direct investment, so trying to get people from this area in the U.S. to invest into Canada for business reasons. So what we would do is make contacts here at targeted industries, so like the big players, people who are up and coming, a little bit of everything, stay up to date with what is going on here in the region, and being able to talk to Canadian companies who are interested in exporting here specifically, either exporting, opening up like a different location or whatnot. But these companies are looking to grow. So like helping them determine to an extent, like, are you guys ready to actually export? Do you have any questions or concerns about that? So part of that was, making those connections. So like after you already make your personal connections with folks here, is then starting to bring in like matchmaking almost. That was a really big part of doing the international business development, is finding like the right Canadian companies and the right US companies to kind of come together. You make that connection, you give them that space in order for them to kind of work it out themselves, whether they want to move forward or not. So that was kind of like the ultimate goal, is for, in tracking, so much data tracking with what you're doing, who you're talking to. If it ever does get up to, having like a deal, like how much is that deal? Because that's all being reported because it's, Canadian taxpayer money. So that's kind of how company matchmaking is, and intelligence. And even, I mean, like there would be even times where I remember there were times where, there would be like a shipment at the border and it couldn't cross over for, into the US for, whatever reason. And that sector specific officer would be like the boots on the ground, talking with like US Customs and Border Patrol and saying like, hey, what's going on? And, kind of talking and smoothing things over in order for it to, kind of get through or help them work through it. It's a little bit of everything too.
No, absolutely. And I have to ask, of course, with the current administration, and of course, the big topic is tariffs and everything going on between the US and Canada with businesses. So talk to us, because you're the expert, I feel like, in understanding how it makes sense to match make businesses in the US and Canada. So what are some of the benefits of working with small businesses in Canada, or how, I guess, like why small business owners would want to do that and the benefits of that?
Small business owners, it also depends on what their sector is too, what they're looking to do.
Yes.
So like a small retail operation, they may need to think and do a little bit more, research if and how they want to enter into the US market. But it really comes down to you have more options. There are going to be things that are going on up in Canada. There are going to be companies and other things like that. And like they're not really happening down here. Or they are, but they're in, a different way. And since we do have such a history of a safe and connected border, it really is just, I don't know about for you, but I mean, so many people, like, especially in like the Metro Detroit region, just kind of view, especially like Windsor, Ontario specifically, it's just across the river.
Literally.
Yes. You go there when you turn 19, to have your first drink, or, to go shopping because of the dollar exchange rate. Mm-hmm. Everything is basically on 30% off all the time, which is what I love to do.
Absolutely.
It really just opens up your options. It gives you connection, and it can even give like the business owners down here a little bit more of a variety, and having a little bit more variety, a little bit of everything, can make things a little bit more stable in the long term, I would say, because you're diversifying.
No, it 100% is. And I think we have such a different view of it being in Metro Detroit, because it's like, oh yeah, Canada's right there. Or my joke is like, oh, in Journey's song, Don't Stop Believing, like born and raised in South Detroit. South of Detroit is Canada. Like that's not a thing, which people are like, what? That's crazy. So you're absolutely right. Because I mean, even going, like I'm a big concert goer. So, let me check if this band is touring in Windsor, because it's, half hour from us where we live. But I think we do have a unique perspective, or even in like Washington State, where they're right by Vancouver. And I think it's different for us northern states when it's just like, yeah, of course you go to Canada when you're 19 have the first drink. So I love that you bring that up. Mm-hmm. And I think it also has to do with it's pretty normal, and not sure if this is true for you, but I mean, we had friends and family that go to Canada for work and come back home, or the bridge or tunnel would both be packed, 5:00 during rush hour, like avoided at all costs. Or if you're in Michigan and you accidentally get on the bridge to Canada and you don't mean to because you went down the wrong way, or the tunnel, I should say. But I do think we have a unique perspective here. So that's something very much to bring up of how we're at today. So going back to kind of what you're doing with the city of Royal Oak, I mean, any exciting projects you can share with us, or anything that you're really pumped about coming into almost mid-2025 here?
Yeah. So one of the big projects that I'm currently working on right now and doing a big push for recruitment is Battle of the Buildings. So we received money through a grant through the state of Michigan to do this program. And Battle of the Buildings, they are a group based out of Grand Rapids, I believe, but don't quote me on that. But they are local to Michigan. And what they do is they provide free energy assessment and benchmarking for businesses, landlords, multifamily, so like apartments, condos, kind of buildings, all throughout the state of Michigan, and are also part of like a larger national Battle of the Buildings group. So they come in, they provide the energy assessment benchmarking. So they come in and they tell you, here's where you could save some money by, turning off the lights, or by changing out the light bulbs to LEDs, or, if you replace your furnace that's like 30 years old, you can drastically, reduce your energy consumption. They look at, like the building very holistically. They offer you recommendations on what to do, and you make those changes, and then you are continued to being benchmarked. So they're still checking in, every month with, okay, this is what your gas rating is. This is what your electrical rating is. You can do water if you want to, but it's optional. The idea is after a year of having made those changes and continuing to track the data, you get to see how much you have reduced your energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. And then at the end of that 1 year period, you're entered into like the larger competition through the state. Then your type of building and business is compared to other, comparables. So like they're comparing, like retail shops to retail shops, restaurants to restaurants, even municipal buildings, like city buildings, hospitals to hospitals, schools to schools. You kind of get the drift. You get to see who's the biggest loser. So the whole point of it is to see like, okay, who reduces their energy the most, and then you get to win. And at the end of that, we'll have like a little like ceremony and recognition of everyone who participated and who won.
That's awesome. So are you doing it only out of Royal Oak, or is it all over?
No, so we are doing it only for the city of Royal Oak. So that is any type of, if you're a business owner, if you're a landlord, for commercial buildings, or for, like I said, for multifamily, you can absolutely be entered into it. We are accepting applications through the entire month of May. If anyone has questions about that, you can find it online, Battle of the Buildings. The city of Detroit is also doing their own competition. So we're very excited to, be two of the first cities to kind of pilot like a city program. And so, kind of part of that is, the thing that we're trying to tell people is that, yes, it is a pilot program, but the shtick is that you'll be reimbursed for certain expenses that you take on in order to lower your emissions. So typically energy company like the, DTE and consumers, they'll provide their own rebates based on what you do. So like if you change out your furnace or, your water heater, things like that. Utility companies will, give you a rebate on that. And so we are looking at providing a match to whatever that rebate is to customers. So they might have a little bit of cost up front, but they will be reimbursed, for eligible activities kind of at the end of it, to make it a little bit easier on the pocketbook and to, make it make sense for businesses too financially.
It totally makes sense. I mean, I did this for my house when I lived in Royal Oak, not a business, very different, but it does make a difference. I mean, I got a free Google Nest from DTE. I forgot how much in rebates, but it's worth the time, especially if you have a giant brick and mortar in Royal Oak. I mean, it does save you so much money in the long run. So that's awesome. How cool. Those are great programs. Now, Emily, as we wrap this up, what advice do you have for listeners?
Ooh, advice. I would say the right thing will happen at the right time. You'll know that it's right because nothing else will make you feel as excited and whole as what the thing you're meant to do is. And just because someone else tells you no, however many times, if it still feels right for you, go for it.
Oh, that's amazing. Emily, you've been an absolutely incredible guest, and give her some extra credit because this is her first podcast she's ever done, which you would have never known how you did it. But if you're interested in following Emily, hearing more about the Battle of the Buildings program, head to the show notes and tune in again next week for another episode of That's Business.
If you're looking for a career change and you're not sure where to start, the Resume Rescue can help. Sure, there's no such thing as the perfect fit for everyone, but here at the Resume Rescue, we're on a mission to find the perfect solution for you. Whether it's changing careers, updating a resume, learning LinkedIn, or practicing interviewing, we have you covered. Find us online at theresumerescue.com and find all of our contact info in our show notes.